he really hated 80s bells. So we had to cancel those from any gig that we ever did.
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm pumped as always to be here with you. I'm excited to have with me a guest co-host, Mr. Damon McMahon. How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you, David, and thank you very much for inviting me on.
Now, Damon's here for a couple of reasons. For those that have watched or listened to a lot of our episodes, Damon's actually been a guest before, so and for a very good reason. And we'll link in the show notes to Damon's episode. Damon's done some amazing work across both playing as a musician and in the music industry. And it's actually Damon that suggested to me our guest today, Mr. John Maul, because Damon and John work together or as colleagues in different music instrument manufacturers, and we'll get to that in the interview. But Damon, I think it's fair to say, just from what I'm seeing, you two have some stories to tell, and only some of them are fit for publication.
Yes, very few of them, in fact, will make air here, that's for sure, I can assure you. Yeah, look, John and I go back, gosh, I don't know, probably 2, maybe heading towards 3 decades now with our time in Japan, working with Roland and R&D capacity, and bringing John to Australia for Roland Australia for clinician tours and product launches, and then in his capacity as an international studio session musician and arranger, catching up with him in various shows. Yeah, and he's absolutely one of nature's gentlemen and humble right to the bone. So.
He is, and you're all about to experience that. John has some amazing insights, even if they are only the publishable ones. There's still a lot to enjoy in there. So we'll let you go listen to John, and we'll talk to you after the show. John, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, and as our listeners and viewers can see, we've already had a couple of laughs before the show starts. So yeah, these two reprobates know each other, and we'll get into that in a minute. But John, I thought we'd kick off just talking about your last 12 months. You've remained incredibly busy. Just tell us about what you've been up to over sort of 2024 and into this year.
Yeah, okay. Well, really, most of the touring and travelling has been down to one particular band, and it's called the Dire Straits Experience. And what can I say about them? Well, some people like to call them a tribute band, but I don't really think they are a tribute band. We've got the main guy who runs it, the sax player, is a guy called Chris White. And anyone who knew Dire Straits would know that Chris was in the band from the mid-80s onwards. So a combination of his skills plus our lead singer, Terence Reich, who is absolutely phenomenal. And we just found this growing success. So wherever we seem to go, whether it's Europe or, as you know, we've been over your way, it's just been incredible. The reaction's been incredible. And, you know, the other really unusual thing, which is well worth mentioning, is the audience. We can't get over the age range of the audience. I mean, we're talking music, 45 years of age, are we? Or plus, thereabouts. And we're looking at teenagers in the front row. We're looking at sometimes younger, mouthing the words. So
wow.
It's been an incredible experience, and it just shows you in this industry, you never know where music's going to take you. And this is where we're at the moment. So, and yes, and of course, towards the end of last year, we had 7 weeks on the road where I came over to New Zealand, and I came over to obviously Australia, Sydney, always fabulous to come over. I, of course, saw you, Damon, as well. And yeah, the audiences are great. The people are great. What can I say? It's been great. Yeah. And then we even had a little stop off in Tahiti on the way home just to do a one-off gig there. Came back home, and then we had 3.5 weeks around France. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's all right. It's not bad.
Very nice. And I've got to ask, from a keyboard viewpoint, obviously there's some amazingly intricate and diverse keyboard parts across Dire Straits' discography, well, more like the second third of their career, because as you know, they were keyboard player free initially. Tell us about how you had to sort of get organised for that, and were there any particular challenges that posed for you once you got involved with them?
You know, it's an interesting question because I mean, I've been playing for 80s nostalgia gigs probably since the millennium, you know, and we always have the same question, and that is, as keyboard players, do we produce the sounds according to the best we have today, or do we try and stay authentic to the sounds that existed at the time? So, you know, if you look at, was it Brothers in Arms album, I think, didn't they use a DX1 on that? And
Probably
some
did.
of the sounds, you know, I mean, to be honest, they were definitive for that time, but they weren't great. But what do? Do we go down that route? Do we use the original Mellotron string sounds? Do we use this? Do we use that? Or do we go for the later sounds? And to be honest, we've tried to go in the middle there. We're not going for the latest. We're not going to use East-West for the strings. We're not going to do that. We're going to just try and keep it within sensible regions. And to be honest, by the end of the day, you've got a fabulous front of house engineer who can make the whole band gel, sound great. So long as we've got the best piano samples, we've got some really good organ samples and the occasional strings, pads and other bits and pieces, hopefully the music and the performance speaks for itself. So no, we're not steeped in technical, sort of bits and pieces, main stage, all of that. No, we've not gone down that route.
No.
And also, we've got the logistics, as every touring musician knows. You're turning up, you're hoping you're going to get what you've asked for. And whilst we've got a great team that will chase it up, some days we do turn up and we haven't exactly got what we've asked for. So that usually means 2 hours, 3 hours in a hotel room with whatever keyboard I've been given, trying to recreate what I should have been done. So the number of keyboards I've had to reprogram over the last few years has been incredible. But it is what it is. We just get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a playing viewpoint, John, the Dire Straits discography, are there particularly challenging pieces, or given your experience, nothing particularly threw you?
The playing through, I mean, the set we do is 2.5 hours. We've just brought aboard 2 or 3 new songs. Obviously, there's the mainstays, if you will, the evergreens, so they've got to all stay in. As a play, I think it's one of the most enjoyable plays I've ever done. It's just, it's a real, I mean, I come off exhausted. And that, for me, is a good sign of rock and roll, because you really are playing, to the best of your ability. Obviously, Alan Clark was a phenomenal piano player as well as a keyboard player. So I've tried to stay true to his style of playing, but Chris has always been very keen for a bit of us to come through as well. And that's what he's tried to nurture in us. And I'll be honest, when I first joined the band, I didn't really get it, because up until then, I'd been hired help, a session player, tell me what you want and I'll do it. But it was totally the opposite way around. He wanted us to almost express ourselves and sort of stay kind of true to what Alan would do. I try and keep some of his licks in and some of his bits and pieces in. But the other get out clause, if you will, is that if anyone heard the band live, certainly back in the 80s, pretty much every night it was going to sound different anyway. So you're not fixed to one gig. You know that what it's about is the spirit of the performance and whatever other substances may have been involved at the time. So that's what it is, really. And if you can get that, that's it. It just brings the band alive. And yeah, it's very rare we walk off the stage thinking that was awful. In fact, I can't remember the last time we did it. It's always elevating in some shape or form. Yeah. And we make a few mistakes, but it doesn't matter, does it? Yeah.
No, that's right. Rock and roll, though, right?
Yeah,
that's rock and roll. We love it.
And John, are you covering both parts? Are you covering both guys and Alan's parts, or have you got two players in the two keys players?
No, we've got the other keyboard player, a chap called Mike Bramwell, very, very good keyboard player. He really takes up all the Hammond stuff. We use a Nord Hammond or a Nord style organ. I think it's number 2, the Nord Hammond organ 2. Forgive me, I forgot the name of it, but he uses that. He gets a fabulous sound out of it. And believe it or not, he uses generally a Roland stage piano, an RD-800, which covers pretty much a lot of the stuff we need. I never happier than on my RD-700NX. I've used it for years. I think it was one of the best Roland ever did. Occasionally we have an RD-2000 turn up. That's absolutely fine. But there was just something very special about that stage piano. So if any of your viewers agree with me, please let me know, because some days I think I'm going mad, but it just sounds fantastic and plays great. So, yeah.
Great.
Nice one. John, obviously, aside from now the very, very top of the business, jetting around to places like Tahiti and Australia and all over Europe, for a young bloke like yourself to take it back a couple of years, can you tell us a little bit about the start of your music journey? You know, how and when did you start? Was it?
What happened? So, it's a bit cliched, really. At the age of 5, I go and see Gran. She had a piano. I'd start knocking out tunes. Before we knew it, Mum and Dad said, let's send her for piano lessons. Went for piano lessons at a place called the Watford School of Music. Started getting into it, enjoyed it. Got to that age, mid-teens, nearly gave up 3 times. Obviously, we've got football, we've got girls, we've got all these distractions, but somehow managed to keep going. And finally, kind of made a decision that it's what I wanted to do, really, about 17 or 18. So found another sort of piano teacher who really, really sort of said, right, if you want to do it seriously, here we go. So I did A-level music, so high-level music. I did all my theory exams. I did all the piano graded exams for the Associated Board, and just went through the whole thing and ended up going to the Royal Academy of Music in, I think it was 1983. I was there for about 4 years. The 4th year was a jazz course, which I didn't even realise until I'd finished the year. But anyway, it's a long story. And then, that was it really, out into the big bad world, like many musicians of that time. So when are we talking? I think we're talking, probably late 80s, early 90s, when everything was black and white. And we started sort of getting into sort of just gigs. I'd be doing functions, I'd be playing, cocktail piano in hotels around London. It was just earning his stripes, just sort of trying to get as much experience as we could. And the big change was not long after that. I think it was the early 90s. I was doing a bit of teaching, and a mate of mine who sells and had a music shop at that time said, you really got to go and see this guy. He really needs a piano lesson. He's an older guy. Could you give him a piano lesson and see what you could do? And I went. And this guy, to be honest, was struggling. He wasn't a great piano player, but he was keen. And he was a lovely chap. And his name was Fred Mead. And he was the financial director of Roland UK, or sales director of Roland UK. And at that time, I had gone for interviews with Yamaha to prospectively be a clinician, a demonstrator. And I'd mentioned it to him and he said, you're not going there, you're coming to work for us at Roland. So before I knew it, I was aboard and that was it. And obviously that began, I think it was 27 years of traveling around the world, working for Japan, R&D, meeting fabulous friends all over the world, Damon included. And just getting an experience of what that industry is like, keyboard development, product development, content development, which I do nowadays a lot of for Yamaha. And also it gave you an insight as well into just what customers want and trying to cater for that. So, that was the general progression. It came to a point where I think nearly approaching 2000 when I really wanted to really do more gigs again. I was really missing the gigs. So I managed to get a 50-50 thing going. I'd do 50% work for Japan and then I'd go out and do my gigs. And before I knew it, thanks to various company restructurings and everything, eventually I was handed back out into the big bad world, but still with a close contact to Roland.
Yeah.
And that was it, really, just carried on gigging.
So, John, I'm obviously really keen to hear about that amazing career in the music instrument industry across Roland and Yamaha before we get into the musicianship side. So, probably to start off, just over those 27 years, what's changed? And I know there's been huge change. What's changed in the way you approach the role and just some of those key moments across that time? And Damon, I'd love you to jump in as well because you've sort of had a career across a similar time frame.
Wow. Where do we start, Damon?
Leave out the incarceration parts.
What's changed? A lot's changed. It's a totally different industry. I stay in touch with some of the guys at Roland all around the world. And now I do a lot of work for Yamaha and that. And yes, what's changed? Retail has changed, as we know, thanks to, the likes of Amazon and the bigger music, like European music companies like Thomann and that. So much has changed. It's kind of sad. It is life's moving forward. I'm not here really to talk about the industry or the business or how we improve it or how we don't improve it. All I can see is the way things are changing. Is it going to be for the better or for the worse? I don't know. Sadly, I fear the day of the music shop, the street corner music shop. I think those guys are going to find it harder and harder and harder. And it's a real shame because if I think back, I mentioned a friend of mine who owned a music shop. He was the one that introduced me to the boss of Roland. It was in a place in Watford. And I remember walking in one day, and it's only a small music shop, and he had this new keyboard from Roland just been put up. And he said, go on, have a go at that. And it was something called a D50. And I sat down and I played it. And as you can imagine, I nearly cried with the sound. It was just phenomenal
Special.
for that time.
Yeah.
And he was such a good friend. He said, keep in mind, I was pretty much a student, really. And he said, you probably want one. I said, oh, yeah, sure. He said, let me go and get you one. You pay me later. And
Wow.
He literally trusted me over the space of 2 years to pay him back. But I fear that era is gone, and the era of just being able to drop into a music shop and chat and talk about the good old days. And, oh, by the way, how can I do this with my keyboard? All of that stuff. It's all changing. So, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. What about you, Damon? What would you say?
Yeah, look, I think it's just a different commercial era that we're in now, and I think that's brought a lot of pressures that perhaps in the good old days, so to speak, given the three young fellas that we're all the pressures were different then. Not saying there weren't pressures, but I think that's changed things. And I think too with younger people now, a lot of which are working in music stores, I think they're able to move around and travel a lot more than was perhaps it wasn't as easy to do back 30, 40 years ago, whatever we're talking. So I think that probably means that staff changeover can be a little bit more of a challenge. And I also think as an industry, music products wise, I'm not sure, certainly in Australia, perhaps globally, that we're doing as much as we could or effectively as we could to recruit and provide or help carve out a career path for young people. That even if it's on the peripheries, not necessarily full-time music products, but in that industry. So, yeah, there's a couple of thoughts for what they're worth.
Yeah. And I do need to ask you both, and I understand both of your roles within the industry was obviously not in the technical development and so on, but I'm just interested as probably observers that have worked in the industry, how have the development cycles changed? How much have consumers played a role in new product development from what you can see as an insider, but also at arm's length?
John?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously a manufacturer would be foolish not to listen to the comments of, customers. And They do. From my experience, certainly with Roland, I know for Yamaha, they listen and they listen very intently. The sad thing is, or the difficulty is, for a manufacturer to explain the inherent issues and difficulties that we can have trying to implement some of these requests. And, you know, this is just a fact of life. So, you know, we'd always say to anyone who's got a keyboard who's not happy with something, or just let us know, please. It doesn't fall on deaf ears. We do hear, we do listen, but the difficulty is sometimes trying to implement that for whatever reasons, whether the operating system or whatever keyboards we're using just doesn't allow us to do certain things. This is something we're constantly faced with. And, you know, often it's just a question of us trying to find the solutions that we can for customers, maybe in other ways that they hadn't expected, but they will see in 2 years' time or in a year's time, whatever. So, you know, but again, in terms of development, it's very, very difficult because having seen it at first hand with, you know, two top keyboard manufacturers, I can tell you the frustrations. I can tell you what it's like sitting across a Japanese engineer, scribbling away in their pad and just going, no, there's no way we can do this, you know. And so you're trying to work with them to go, okay, we can't do this. What else can we do? How can we make this work better for customers? So there's probably occasional frustrations from customers, but all I can say is please, you know, bear with us. It's not as easy as you might think to make substantial changes to keyboards, to equipment, anything like that.
That's right. And do you feel those frustrations have increased? Because there's a bit of a stereotype or an assumption out there that because most keyboards now have a heavy software basis, that people just tend to take this blasé view of just fix it in the software, make that now work within the software. And I assume that's one of the barriers you're facing to try and make people understand how hard it is.
Yeah, it's again, if you could afford a team of software developers to the level of Apple, then you'd be laughing. You know, if you could have hundreds of software developers at your call and go, today you're going to go and fix this, it would be fabulous. Life doesn't work that way. You know, even in a software house of 100 developers, you know, those developers are already working quite keenly at various projects in terms of keyboards. They could be working at various aspects of the keyboard. That's all eventually got to come together. It's all deadlines. It's all got to work in sync. So for us to suddenly say, by the way, can you guys just take a rest from that for a week and do something else? The whole thing can get thrown. Now, that's my understanding of it. Please don't quote me as being official, but that's the way I've heard that these are the challenges, if you will.
Yeah, and I do love Yamaha, and I'm sure the other manufacturers may do this. Yamaha have I've forgotten the name of it, but their ideas generated, basically the forum where users can put in user requests for future improvements. Yes. I love that, and you can receive weekly emails, and yeah, I think that's one of the upsides of the current development cycle.
Yeah.
John, having your work now with both Yamaha, content and capacity, and obviously you have a very good understanding of the technical capabilities of the instruments you're working with to develop content. And also Roland, I know you were quite R&D focused for quite a while with them. Are there any interesting contrasts or any comments you'd share with the listeners on the differences between those brands, whether it be culturally, whether it be even any funny anecdotes, but two quite contrasting but very competitive brands, right?
Yeah, it's probably tricky for me to answer that.
Yes.
Of course, there's differences. Yamaha, we all know, has got more money. I think in terms of development, that's my understanding of it, compared with what I saw with Roland. And that's fine. That's just the way it is. having worked for Roland within the Roland development side and seeing what happens, I know how much and how hard those engineers work to achieve what they achieved.
Absolutely.
And it's probably changed a bit now. It may have done, and it may have had a different structure inside. But I remember how hard we all used to work. I mean, a 2-week visit to Japan, I'd come back wasted and couldn't work for a week because
Absolutely.
it was so intense. And I would imagine there's no change with that. Surely they must keep going. With Yamaha, there are a lot of resources. But again, the intent, the team I work with are a phenomenal bunch of fantastically musically talented musicians. I feel honoured to work with the team that I'm with at the moment. And, we've got sound engineers, we've got fabulous programmers. And, I've really, since working for should we say, the R&D side for Yamaha, which is pretty much since the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, I had a learning curve that pretty much took me about 6 months solid working at home to get to a level where I could hopefully start producing useful stuff for them. But the team are phenomenal. They are very, very talented musicians. Never, ever think for one moment you're not dealing with, on the engineering side, really good musicians that know what they're talking about. It's the same for both companies. We're all in this, to really help the customer achieve their musical dreams. That's what we're here for. And, we may have slightly different ways of doing it according to the companies. Again, Korg, phenomenal company, phenomenal instruments. So we're just all trying to achieve hopefully the same goal, and that is for happy customers who want to buy our products. And that's what we're aiming for at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, I've got our listeners and viewers are now aware you're going to do an exclusive unveil of the Montage successor here for us right now because of your R&D experience. A serious question. Obviously, you've worked with instruments for many years. They're all amazing, as you've just said. I'm looking off to your left. I'm assuming that's a Modi X8 you've got there on the bottom.
Yeah, that's a Modi X8. I thought I must get one because a lot of the development I've been doing is more for the home keyboard side, the Genos and all of that stuff. And to be honest, I'd neglected the synth side, and I thought I'd just owe it to myself to know the Yamaha synths, the way they're structured. If you think I'm indoctrinated by Roland for God knows how many years in their way of thinking and their way of programming, etc. So it took about a week. I sat down, I went at it, and I absolutely love the system. I just think it's phenomenal. There's two very different ways, two very different approaches. It speaks for itself, obviously, but it's phenomenal. Yeah.
And I do want to ask about things like the Genos because I've always been fascinated, and I'm only a weekend warrior. I've always been fascinated about the divide between keyboards like that and ones like the Modi X, and the same across Roland Korg and all the other manufacturers. I had a go at a Genos in the last year. They are absolutely stunning, amazing keyboards. Why do you think there's, I don't know whether it's a snobbery or a divide between those sort of keyboards and what you've got there near you?
It's interesting you said that because there are perceptions and companies are tied down by marketing directions, of course. And Genos has always been very much geared in the UK at a certain age range of customer, usually with a certain time of life where they've got a bit more cash to spend. And we have to, if you will, kowtow to that customer and make sure we provide for that customer. But I remember getting a delivery of a Genos 1 and I had an 80s gig come up and I was using my RD-NX again, RD-700NX. And I think I was doing Nik Kershaw. I was doing, who else were we doing? I can't remember, Go West. There was a few synthy things that were required. And I thought, I looked at the Genos and went, I wonder if I could do it. So I programmed the Genos up for a lot of this lead synth sounds and everything. And at the end of the gig, not only did I get a thumbs up from the artists involved, but the front of house sound engineer asked me, and he said, what was that top keyboard you were using? He said, I've never seen it. It's phenomenal sound. I said, well, it was a Genos. And he said, why haven't I heard of it? And I went, well, obviously explained. So, yeah, it is a stigma. There is a stigma attached. But, you know, if you realise the potential of think of yourself as a songwriter, and maybe you're not the best at programmers in the world, and you've got an idea for a song. You just want to quickly get it down, get some chords down, get a feel going. You know, the Genos would let you do that. And after you've done it, if you're not happy with the sound and if you want it changed, you can just extract it as a MIDI file, put it into your DAW, off you go, and tweak it to your heart's content. And yeah, so it's kind of a mystery to me, because if people realise what it can do, then you kind of go, you know, do you realise what you're actually missing out on here? And some of the, you know, the articulation samples that we've got in there, the saxophone samples, etc., with all the breath attacks and the breath drop-offs, and that, they're pretty good. They're about one of the best I've heard. And as we know, we're keyboard players. If anyone asks you to play a sax solo on a keyboard player, you know, we lose the will to live, don't we? Because you just don't want to. I've got to a stage now where when we do Paul Young and we do Common People, I don't know if you remember it, there's a trombone solo on it. And I used to try and imitate it, but I gave up years ago and just play a synth line. It's much easier. So, but with that, you could almost sort of start to get back to it again. And it's playable. It's not just programmable. No. It's playable. So, yeah, it's interesting you say that, because sometimes tricks are missed.
Yeah, no, great point.
John, you've gone through your musical history, you know, how you had your lessons and developed, went to the Royal Academy of Music, started your gigs and things like that. Your first pro gig, from there, and then transitioning, as a working musician, you've covered all that pretty much. Started doing piano gigs and all that sort of stuff, and then moved on. But your role as Rick Astley's musical director, and Rick is a hugely loved artist all around the world now, and I think he had a little bit of a label at one stage as almost being this sort of slightly geeky kind of a guy, but he's hugely successful. I know you've had quite a background with Rick as MD and keyboardist. Can you tell us a bit about that? I'm sure everyone would love to hear.
Yeah, I think it was probably all told about 10 years. I pretty much MD'd for him for about 5 of those years, but our very first ever gig was in Japan. I can't, forgotten the date, but yeah, it was kind of weird because we went out to Japan to do a one-off kind of tour with him. And we were really all hand-picked musicians for the job. He'd known us because a lot of us were involved in these nostalgia 80s gigs. We call them Here and Now tours. And that was pretty much our first sort of foray, if you will, with Rick. And that was kind of for him coming back into the public again. I think almost to the point where he was kind of trying to find himself a bit, you know, and go, okay, well, what am I now? Where do I stand now in the grand scheme of things? Yeah, it was really good. I mean, what can I say about the man? He's hugely talented. He's got a voice that's just phenomenal. It's just where the power comes from, I don't know. But there's legendary stories about this. And people just not realising, fitting the face with the voice. So yes, I've worked with him over the years. He brought out his album 50, which was one we did, we toured, I think that was 2016, 2015, 2016. And he's just a sheer pleasure to work with. He knows what he wants musically, that's for sure. And I know the album that album he did most of it himself. He records it all, back in his studio at home. So he is and does like control musically of what's going on. I remember, distinctly one of the things he always used to hate was 80s bells. He really hated 80s bells. So we had to cancel those from any gig that we ever did. And it's a shame, really, because pretty much every Stock Aitken and Waterman sound has got 80s bells on, but they had to go by the wayside with Rick's gigs. But no, it's a real pleasure. But I mean, he's a phenomenal drummer. He'll get up and play. And he's a real muser in terms of he's open to keeping the band open. So if you want to take a few more verses and let's have a solo and let's do this, there's none of this rigorous, I've got to sing 2 more choruses and then we finish. There's none of that. He's an absolute a really good musician. And I suppose we'd use the term a diamond geezer as well, which is just, he's a lovely chap, a really lovely chap. He's always treated us really well in the band. The band moved on. It evolved a bit. I think I left in 2016, into 2016. And he went on to do some other bits and pieces. Very successful, rightly so. I think he's taking a break this year, as I understand it. I still keep in touch with some of the band members. And I'm not surprised. He's worked really, really hard. And we'll just have to wait and see where he crops up next and what his plan is next. But and he can also sing fabulous swing music as well. He can do all the Sinatra greats. And I heard him perform with, I think it was the BBC Big Band at a festival. And absolutely phenomenal. He said the only difficulty he had was trying to remember the words to a lot of those songs, mainly because his father used to sing all the wrong words to the songs, and that's how he learned.
That's gold.
He's a cool guy, very, very cool guy.
Yeah, and I mean, for our listeners and viewers out there that aren't aware of Rick Astley beyond his initial appearance in the 1980s, you couldn't get a more different performer nowadays. As John's alluded to, the diversity of the music's incredible. He will jump on drums. There's an amazing video out there of him doing Highway to Hell. Was it at Nebworth or the other amazing festival in Northern England?
Yeah, he did Glastonbury.
Glastonbury, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
He's just amazing. So linking to that, John, I have to ask, you mentioned Stock Aitken Waterman and Pete Waterman and so on, and I know you did some sessions or some work with Kylie Minogue Jason Donovan. Just tell us about how that relationship came about, so going back a little bit further.
Yeah, well, again, a lot of it stems back to these 80s nostalgia gigs and tours and everything. It was called a Here and Now Tours. The promoter is a guy called Tony Denton, he was probably one of the first on the scene to see, the benefits of trying 80s tours and nostalgia gigs. As in, when I say nostalgia gigs, I mean getting the original artists, having a full show, maybe of 10 artists, maybe have one artist on for 3 numbers, another artist is so and so on. A kind of, conveyor belt of artists. But it just proved to be a very, very successful formula. And we've had other promoters come along, recreate that as well. But through that, I got to meet a lot of the 80s musicians, artists, including Jason Donovan. Again, he's a real character. He's fun to work with, always to rehearse. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? He's a pro. He gets up and does a really, really good gig. The Kylie Minogue was a one-off, admittedly, and there was a sudden thought wouldn't it be great if we could get Jason and Kylie together to do their, what was it, especially for you, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was it. Wouldn't it be lovely? And I remember getting agreement from Kylie's team, and they turned up for a rehearsal, and I think we were going to do it at Hyde Park. And I remember she came a few days early. We did the sound check. We did a rehearsal, I should say. she came through, they sang it through. I have to say, respect to Kylie, totally on the nail, came in, professional, did it. Did a fantastic job, left again, said thank you very much. And we planned to see her 3 days later in Hyde Park in the centre of London. And then we had this rainfall or rainstorms like you've never had over 3 days running up to the gig, and the whole thing was waterlogged. Whole thing had to be cancelled. So basically that big sort of that reuniting of these two stars had to wait until the following Christmas. And I think we did it at Wembley. And I remember she was invited to come, do you want to just run it again? She said, no need, I've got it, you know. And it was a phenomenal moment. Somewhere on YouTube, if you scour it through, you'll find it. And yeah, it's absolute pleasure. So so I've not done a lot with Kylie, but I've done a lot with Jason. I've done all kinds of bits with Jason. And yeah, again, they're all pros. You know, it's amazing what you Australians come up with, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there are two others that I'm assuming it's the same story, John, via the Here and Now. And the Here and Now also, they used to put out CDs, didn't they? There'd be Here and Now 17.
They did a few. Yeah, I think we did also some DVDs. And you also covered 80s and also 70s. We used to have a brand called Best Disco in Town, of which I'll tell you about a disastrous story involving that later on. But
please do.
But we used to do that one as well. And, you know, 70s music, well, it's just awesome to play. It's so much groove and everything. But yeah, so sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's okay. No, I assume it's those festivals that your brief or extensive involvement, whichever one it was, with Nik Kershaw and Howard Jones. They're two major artists that have inspired me, that's for sure.
Yeah, they're all great. They're all great. Who do we say? So Howard Jones, the pleasure with working with Howard is... he's just written, as we know, awesome songs. And what I always liked about working with Howard is he'd come into the house band rehearsal and he'd go, just play me what you're intending to play of my song. And so obviously, you know, we're doing our best to recreate, but you're listening to an original recording, you're listening to the various live versions you've heard on YouTube, you're trying to amalgamate it all. And Howard was really like flexible to what the band did. And you go, whatever you did there, I really like that. Can you keep that in? It might not have been in the original, but something happened. And that's where I have immense respect for him as a musician, composer, who is still open to let his music breathe and develop according to whoever's playing it. So definitely fabulous guy to work with. And Nik is an absolute dream as well. Now, obviously, as a keyboard player with Nik's stuff, you're so wary and on edge that there's all this sophisticated stuff going on with keys. You know, wouldn't it be good? I mean, I had to do the last gig I did. It was, when was it? It was a few months ago with him, and he does have a few tracks, but only kind of percussive stuff. But he only wants one keyboard player. So guess what? It was me. And as you can imagine, there's an awful lot to cover, you know, on a lot of his songs. So, I mean, the poor old Mod X is getting split left, right and centre. And I'm trying to remember, right, bells are up here and pads down here. You know, I need to wear a brown paper bag. And is it a full moon? And will we achieve and be able to achieve it? But yeah, the long and short of it is, these are all phenomenal musicians. I suppose, you know, I don't want to cast aspersions at today's pop stars or anything. And, you know, perhaps I don't really work with it. But certainly for that time, you were dealing with musicians. You were dealing with people who went into the studio. In the 80s, there was a lot of experimentation. Sometimes some of the guitarists didn't know for sure what they were doing. And I worked with certain guitarists who go, I sort of played that. And you go, right, I know what it is. And they can't describe it to you musically. They didn't have that training, but it doesn't matter. It just sounded fabulous. And that was it. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be had. There's one or two prima donnas still in there, but, you know, we don't talk about those.
With all those collaborations you've had, John, I'm guessing one of your answers I'm going to ask you to describe is probably flexibility. But how would you say your amazing range of collaborations with such a contrasting, group of artists, how have they, influenced you, do you think? Flexibility, I think, would be one for sure. You've had to be.
Yeah, flexibility. I think what's really happened is, you think, you do the 70s music. You could work with Tavares. You could work with Gloria Gaynor. You could work with any of those 3 Degrees. You could then do the 80s and you work with artists of such different styles of music. We may work with Altered Images. We may work with, God knows, whoever it is, Flock of Seagulls, or Flock of Seagull, as we call it now, because it's just one guy. But, it is, you learn to try and take on board the whole style, the spirit. Altered Images was about a bunch of teenage kids that just thrashed their life out and played and had so much fun and so much energy, and sometimes it's harder for older boys to do that, but that's what it was about. And that's what you've got to do your utmost to get over, And if you're going to work and do the music of Odyssey, that was about cool grooves. It's about getting the funk right, getting the groove right, and having to. The times I've had to really be careful about selecting the right drummers for certain music. Certainly for the music of the 70s, American 70s funk, etc. It's got to be right. And so I think that's what it's given me, a huge appreciation musically of what's been achieved, of the varying styles that I've seen over the years, compositionally, stylistically, of course, and harmonically, everything that's involved. And of course, there was so much enrichment with harmony back in those days, certainly ever so in the 70s, perhaps slightly less so in the 80s. But of course, as we get to today, the harmonic usage and language that's used seems to be, for my ears, more reserved. Now, there could be all kinds of reasons for that. That's a conversation for another day. But this is what I feel it's taught me, to take on board not only the style of music, but the very spirit of the music and what it was about. Why? Who were they playing for at the time? Was it for a discotheque back in the 70s? Was it for a nightclub in the 80s, somewhere, in the West End of London? And it's just getting that feel. That's what it's about.
Yes.
And I think that flexibility, and you're just saying about the different styles, John, I can't think of a better preparation than for the orchestra pit in a West End musical than that. So tell us about, that's another key aspect of your career. You've played in some amazing musicals. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the musical side of things. I'm a major musical fan, love talking about orchestra pits and approach to playing. Bore me to death, please.
Yeah, that's usually word of mouth. So, I've obviously got lots of musician friends already in there doing shows, and not so much nowadays, but I used to get an awful lot of calls. Oh, do you fancy coming in and doing Deps? I'm the first keyboard player for this and the second keyboard player for that. Definitely one of the most memorable, enjoyable ones was doing We Will Rock You. And I usually had to, there were 4 keyboard players, including the conductor. And I would normally do, I think it was keys 1, which was non-conducting, but had a lot of the piano-y bits in it. And it was different from normal because we weren't in the pit. It was the London show, so we were up on the sides. Conductor, I had the conductor right there by the side of me. And there was still a lot of movement. There were some clicks, but there's still a lot of movement in the performing and playing. Sadly, clicks, certainly in West End shows, have started to become more of a necessity thanks to, shall we say, disagreements between performing artists and musicians about tempos. So clicks seem to override that, and then there's no argument. That's it. That's the tempo. That's what you're going to get. But this was the good old days when we could still let rock and roll breathe. It was really, really good. We turn up. I think all the keyboards were Kurzweil 2600s. I'm not a style expert. And a friend of mine had done, I believe, a lot of the programs on the. It was a chap. His name's a chap called Jeff Leach, and he's now famous for doing pretty much most of the keyboards on the BBC Strictly dance show now. So the band, he's in that band. Extraordinarily talented musician and programmer, and he programmed up. I mean, we had just a rack of, JB 1080s and Kurzweil modules and goodness knows what else. 4 keyboards, as I already explained, around us, everything MIDI'd up to within an inch of its life. And it was a rock solid set. So, it was a lot of fun indeed. So, but I did a little bit for
Avita, yeah.
Did Avita. We did, Avita was, that is, I've had roasts in my time, but that was a true roast. And I wouldn't have minded just having some kind of heart monitor attached to me for my very first ever deck to Avita. I mean, I think the opening conductor, it's something like 15/16 or something stupid, like 15/8, and it's just all, like this. And it's the scariest musical ever to play for a first keyboard point of view. Managed to survive it. Didn't get the never again. That's all that's important, not to get the never again. And came back and did it a few more times. So, I mean, I've a lot of friends who do musicals around town. It's obviously a wonderful source of income for musicians in London and in, a lot of the cities up and down UK. I think things are getting harder. Budgets are kicking in, bands are getting smaller. I already mentioned the horrific click track syndrome, which is kicking in more and more and more. And it's, I'll be interested to see where we are in 10 or 20 years' time. Musicians Union in the UK do their very best, I think, to try and protect musicians in these circumstances. But, budgets are budgets, and that's it. And who's going to go first? But, if we can cut 1 or 2 musicians down in the black pit that you never see but only hear, who's going to go first? So it's a sad reality, but that's what I'm seeing anyway.
Yes, John, you mentioned something about the best disco in town. Could that be an answer to the question, cherish?
It was fun because I only remembered it last night because I'm really lucky. I've had very, very, very few train wrecks. So, I'm so grateful. Thank you, whatever it is. And I've kind of got this belief in a kind of, not a St. Peter, but a St. Peter of musicians that make sure the gig gets done, regardless of what adversity we face. It always gets done, But this one, we came pretty damn close. I think it was 2004, best disco in town. Perth. We just arrived in Perth. And I can't be absolutely sure, but I think it was the day of the actual gig when we were asked to go in early, 10 o'clock, to run through Gloria Gaynor's set list of 45 minutes. And we were all on stage, gear had been set up, and we were waiting around. And our MD, was looking anxiously. And Gloria sort of came up the stage and said, hello to our MD. I'm not going to mention any names because I'm not going to get into trouble. But, and the MD said, great to see you. If you've got the charts, I'll hand them out to the band and we'll get going. And Gloria said, no, I haven't got the charts. I said to you, you need to bring the charts. And he said, no, I haven't bought the charts. Yeah, and
no.
So, if you can imagine that evening, 7:30 show, plus other artists, we've got a 45-minute set with Gloria, and we haven't got a single dot in town. So now, yes, we can all play I Will Survive, but that ain't going to keep us going for more than 10 minutes, you know. So yeah. So basically, our MD grabbed the thickest pad of A4 manuscript you've ever seen, pencils, rubbers, sat there with not his phone, because this is pre-dating the time we used to send PDFs and have Fourscore on our iPads and that, pencil in hand, and literally had to go through every single song, transposing it, because he only had the originals and some of those keys were transposed as well. Wow. So he said, right, this is this, but we're going to have to do it. So we're going, oh, God. And, of course, he's happy writing down the chords, but we're still going, what about that brass line? What about that string line? What about this? And so yeah, it was a near disaster. I'm pleased to say we made it just about by the skin of our teeth. But, yeah, I mean, it's funny, you know, the way things happen. I mean, there was just one other one, which this is going back. When I first started, you'd get a phone call from a promoter and he'd say, can you get into town, into London? It's this hotel. There's a band there. You just need to, it's a wedding. Can you just go and do some busking numbers, play a dinner set? And it was the norm. This is the late 80s, early 90s. And I'd turn up at this one very swanky London hotel, the ballroom, set up, other musicians around me setting up. And we started with the dinner set and we started playing. And I was getting some funny looks from the other musicians, but I played, you know, we all had our own gear and stuff. And they were calling out, you know, a girl from Ipanema or whatever it was. I finished the first dinner set and he said to me, I think he was kind of the band leader. The guy said to me, he said, look, it was really good. I'm really enjoying it. He said, but who are you? And I said, I'm John Maul. I've been booked to play. And he said, I've just rung our promoter. He's not booked a keyboard player for this gig. And I said, you're kidding me, aren't you? And it transpires this hotel has 2 ballrooms. I was playing with the band. So I had to get the gear upstairs to the other ballroom really, really quickly. And, of course, the question is, who do you invoice? That's the question.
Both.
That is gold, John. That's one I've never heard before. That's amazing.
It won't happen anymore. Those things don't happen anymore, but it did then.
That is amazing. Look,
John, a question that the Keyboard Chronicles likes to ask every guest is around tagging a keyboard player. So is there someone out there, as in, you know, a keyboard MD artist, whoever, that you would really like to hear their story?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of players. If you're talking high level, I still want to hear Bruce Hornsby, but you've not done Bruce.
No, he's on our bucket list, John, believe me.
He's on your bucket list. Bruce Hornsby would be great. But if you really want a player who I call him a colleague, a friend, he is a phenomenal musician. And he is, and has been for years, the director, he's the MD of the BBC Strictly Dance Band, BBC Strictly Dave Arch. And if you can speak to Dave, boy, will he have some stories for you. Right. He is phenomenally talented, and he's conducted and led the BBC Strictly Band for a very, very long time. He does all the arrangements. He's played on some amazing albums, including one of my albums that I was going to mention to you, but I'll mention it when we get round to that. But so he's, David Arch.
Great.
Ask David.
No, thank you. Appreciate that a great deal. And then we've got the dreaded Desert Island Discs question, John. So let's talk about your 5 albums.
That's horrible. How can you do 5 albums in a lifetime, you know? Okay, well, I mentioned Bruce Hornsby. Here comes the Noisemakers. I had to make a note of it. 1999, a live album, double CD. I just think, I mean, Bruce Hornsby is for me the god. He's got country, he's got rock in his fingers, he's got jazz. He's got it all. And it's beautifully blended.
Yeah.
And I still do it to this day. I've got friends who I play. So he does do just the way it is, but he preludes it with a jazz standard, Best You Is My Woman. And if I play just that clip to people, they are stuck. They can't tell you who it is or what it is. And that, but of course, if you listen, he starts just putting in a few little tricks and a few little references to the big hit that's coming up. And yeah, so Bruce Hornsby, Here Comes the Noisemakers. I had to mention what is my first or my introduction to prog rock, and that was Wind and Wuthering, Genesis, 1976. It was what got me into Genesis. It's what got me into prog rock. And ironically, it was after Peter Gabriel left. But yeah, that was pretty phenomenal. Really. Piano album, another one, a trio, is, I believe it was his first ever live radio broadcast in New York, A&R Recording Studios, Elton John. Wow. The album is called 171170. And it's just the three of them. It's Dee Murray, Nigel on drums, and Elton playing piano. And it is, I mean, it is just sublime. It's just a trio, and they fill the evening out. They've got the audience absolutely going ballistic. And it's proper, you know, what I call rock and roll piano. And it really shows what an amazing player he was and still is. So, yeah, that definitely goes there. Bit of a thoughtful one. I do love orchestration, arranging and everything. And I've got to do a caveat and say there's 2 albums that I link together. First one, Joni Mitchell, Both Sides Now.
Yep.
Vince Mendoza's arrangements are just phenomenal. It's like there was something magical happened in the studio. And Dave Arch has played on that album.
Wow.
He was on it. I don't know to what degree. He does get a credit to it. But the other one I'd couple with that is a jazz singer called Shirley Horn, Here's to Life album. And that was an arranger called Johnny Mandel who did all of the strings. And I gather he did it after the trio had been recorded, or he heard the trio first and then he arranged all around it. So it's a more of a sort of a different approach, if you will. Yeah, there's one final album, and I just, as I said, there's so many albums, but I was looking for albums that really influenced me. The final one is Monty Alexander, jazz pianist, live in Montreux, and I believe that was 1976. And again, it's a trio album. If ever there is a masterclass for keeping an audience on the edge of their seats, go and listen to this album. It is phenomenal. It's jazz, it's blues, but it's so theatrical, the album, and you've got to hear it to know what I mean by that. And it's absolutely phenomenal. So there you go.
Great picks.
6 albums.
Yeah, no, 5, 6 is always good. Thank you, John. That's superb. And our final question is a 10-parter, so we call it our quick fire 10. So, John, Damon and I will just fire these questions at you in a short and sharp way, if you can give us an answer. The first album you recall hearing as a child that really had an impact, or as a teenager that had an impact on you?
Do you know what it was? The Muppet Show album.
Nice.
Yes, nice.
Now, I'll tell you why. Don't laugh. It had, if I'm not mistaken, Jack Parnell, famous band leader, and his band playing on it. It's some of the most phenomenal musicians on this album. I think drummer was Ronnie Verrill, all old school players. It was an amazing album, but everyone laughs when I say it, but it was a great album. So, and I've still got it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Question 2, John. The most important pre-gig ritual for you, and I'll remind you, young man, this is a family show.
Yes.
We pre-gig rituals change from artist to artist, as you know. I don't think Rick would mind me saying, Rick Astley, that we used to have a little shot of Jägermeister to get us going. To be honest, when I'm working with a house band, pre-gig rituals are all about, should we just talk through everything and make sure we're all singing the same hymn sheet? So I'm really sorry to be boring, but that's about as pre-gig ritual as it gets when we're doing gigs and we've got so much to cover.
Yeah, no, absolutely. John, if you hadn't been a musician, what do you think your career choice would have been?
There was one other thing I went to interviews for, and that was to be a pilot for the Royal Navy. So had I done it and achieved it, it would have been a very different life. And I also may have also met some very interesting members of the royal family. So, but we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Right. Excellent. Moving right along. Hit the transpose button or adjust on the fly.
Oh, if you're reading, sometimes it's easier to use the transpose button. If you're playing by ear, it's just easier to play in a different key for me. So, yeah. So, but can we keep F sharp major to a limit, please?
Yes, please. Absolutely. Favourite gig you've ever done, if that's at all possible, John?
Oh, favourite gig ever done. Oh, so hard. It really is hard. There's so many gigs, so many wonderful places. We did do Hyde Park with Rick. It was 40,000 in the audience.
Wow.
And it was, I think it was quite a special day. Yeah, it was quite a special day indeed. But, you know, we've been all around the world. Singapore, we did some fabulous gigs. Japan, always fabulous to come back to Australia and New Zealand. So it's a real tricky one. Nothing leaps out to mind. It's just they're all great. Yeah.
Right, you've almost touched on it. Favourite city you've played?
Right. I've got to answer this one very carefully.
It doesn't have to be Australia.
What statute of limitations in various countries, John?
Do you know, it's really weird. I don't think I can equate it to a city.
No?
Look, we play France. We do some of the most fabulous tours in France, and the audiences are all amazing. We can go to Germany. The audiences are great, but in a different way. We can go to various countries, you get different audiences. If you're talking about my favourite city to visit, well, I've always said in life, of all the travelling I've done, the two places I could potentially settle, first one was Vancouver, because I've always loved Vancouver. And the second one is Melbourne. Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
So, yeah.
Yeah, you're a charmer. John, name a song that you used to love, but you've now played it to death.
Hey! Oh, dear. It's so difficult, isn't it? When I used to do functioneering, I remember we always used to open with, it'd be a wedding, we'd always open with, I just called to say I love you. And I remember one day thinking, I'm going to have to hang myself if I play this song one more time. There's no disrespect to Stevie. It is an amazing song, but it was just one too many times for me. So I think that's fairly highly rated.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know what it's like. If you've done functioneering, you just have certain songs and yeah, you're just looking for like a beam you can hang your new song and just go and yeah, go and disappear quietly.
Favourite music documentary or movie?
Oh,
again, it's a family show.
Again, it's a family show.
Well, it actually is. We even allow swearing, so go as inappropriate as you like, John. That's
all right.
fine.
So therefore, you need to be honest.
It's easy. It's so easy. Without a doubt, the Spinal Tap.
Yeah.
boy, are we looking forward to the next one. When is it coming out? Is it September? Spinal
Yeah, it's
Tap
this
2?
year sometime, yeah.
Spinal Tap 2. If anyone non-musical asked me to explain life on the road, I say, look at Spinal Tap, and every aspect of that show or film keeps reoccurring in my life. Even recently, and I'm not going to go into details, I'll just say the word Janine and how we've had a similar experience in life. And it just, it never stops. It keeps going and going and going. And although I do know how to handle a square lump of cheese in a brown roll, so there's no problem there.
Love it. John, name one thing you'd like to see invented as a keyboard player that would make your life easier.
Wow. Well, the usual thing is, can I have a non-weighted piano, isn't it? That's the one we always used to get asked. And it used to make you think and go, how the hell can we do that? I think if the technology or mechanical technology could ever exist to recreate the feel of a piano, but as we know, or as I know, with aging years, carrying heavy 88-note piano keyboards gets harder and harder. But I'm just not happy playing on any. If I've got to play a piano, I don't want to play on a synth keyboard. I've got to play on a piano. That's why for programming, I've got a weighted action by the side of me as well as a synth action side of me. So I guess in real terms, if they could ever truly master that, how can you produce a weighted action keyboard but without the weight? Sounds stupid, but that would be my biggest dream.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And last but not least, your favourite or a favourite non-musical activity or hobby?
Non-musical activity or hobby? Wow. I don't have time for non-musical activity. No, I live a very boring life. We're pretty much more out in the countryside. So do you know what? Nothing makes me happier than dog walking, getting out, occasional cycle rides, meeting up with mates for a pint down the pub. I am so dull and boring, you can't believe it. But do you know, that's the thing. You tour, you go away, and as you can imagine, and I'm sure you know, you live a kind of different life for a few weeks. In running up to Christmas last year, 7 weeks, and you are just so hungry for normality again, just to get back to normality. So yeah, that's it really. Sorry, there's nothing more exciting than that.
No, that's good. I think you're right. There's nothing wrong with being boring. I was worried you were going to say dogging rather than dog walking, and I'm glad you didn't. So that was
well,
good.
We've got dogging outside just down the corner, actually. So if I do get bored, there's always that opportunity, I suppose.
And for our non-UK listeners, you'll need to Google that, or maybe don't. And so...
Not dog walking, it's dogging, but
that's right. John, I can't thank you enough for your time. It's been absolutely amazing speaking with you. And I know we've mentioned in the introduction that you and Damon go back a long way. And look, you've made an amazing impact both musically and across the industry. And we really appreciate your time.
It's been really, really enjoyable. Thank you, David. Damon, it's lovely to see you again as well since
you too, mate.
Beer on the beach. And, maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yes, please.
Absolutely.
And there we have it. Damon, you mentioned in the introduction that John is one of nature's gentlemen, and he certainly proved it during that interview.
Yeah, absolutely. He is. He's very, very humble. He almost shrugs off the level that he has worked at in various parts of the industry, from working with the very top keyboard brands in the world at an R&D level to his session work, touring and recording with some major artists and all over the world. He's just so humble and so fascinating, that almost hybrid music career that he has stitched together and succeeded through.
Exactly. And I'm happy to pull back the curtain a little bit for our viewers and listeners. John did mention after we stopped recording that they are discontinuing the whole montage series and just merging it into the Genos line. So you heard it here first. Now, that obviously, it's really important I now say this, that is a joke.
Yeah, I'm not saying another word to my lawyers.
That is absolutely a joke. So no, a huge thank you to John for his time. It was amazing. What a guy. So as always, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen. We hope you got a lot out of it as well. And I do want to give a quick shout out to our gold and silver supporters. So the wonderful Mike Wilcox at Midnight Mastering. If you are creating your own music and need someone to do an amazing job of mixing and mastering, Mike's your guy at midnightmastering.com. The lovely Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. Tammy, you'll kill me, but I know Tammy's got an exciting new project coming out that maybe we'll be able to mention down the track as well. So thank you, Tammy, as always. The brilliant Dewey Evans from the sunny land of Wales. Thank you, sir, for your ongoing support. And last but definitely not least, Dave Bryce and the team at musicplayed.com forums. Lots of interesting discussion on the forums this week. Everything from the Viscount Legend 1 through to... we've covered off Keyscape stuff this week. There's always some interesting discussion going on, so I highly recommend that. But again, thank you for listening. We'll be back in a week or two. Damon, thank you, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll definitely have you back on at some stage.
If you must. Thank you very much, David.
If I must. Your pleasure is all ours. So, yeah, look, thanks everyone out there. And in the meantime, keep on playing.